What do a Babylonian king, an Egyptian queen, and an Athenian lawgiver have in common? They all left behind a legacy of laws that shaped the ancient world and influenced the modern one. In this video, we will explore the lives and achievements of Hammurabi, Sobekneferu, and Draco, three historical figures who ruled with justice and authority. We will learn about their codes of law, their political and cultural achievements, and their challenges and controversies. Join us as we travel back in time to meet these fascinating rulers and discover how they changed history.
During the 19th century BC, ancient Egypt was experiencing a time of great prosperity and stability under the rule of the 12th dynasty. This stability was threatened when the reigning pharaoh Amenemhat IV died without a male heir. In response, Egyptian elites made the unprecedented decision to elevate a woman by the name of Sobekneferu to the role of pharaoh. The crown was traditionally given to a man because they were perceived as the earthly manifestation of the male god, Horus. Sobekneferu's rise to power broke this thousand-year tradition, becoming the first female pharaoh and one of about a dozen women to ever rule Egypt. Amenemhat III brought Egypt to the greatest heights it would ever reach during the Middle Kingdom period. After a lengthy rule spanning over 40 years, Amenemhat III died and was succeeded by his only living son, Amenemhat IV, who ultimately ruled for only 9 years before dying without an heir, leaving his sister, Sobekneferu, with the strongest claim to the throne. According to the king list compiled by the 3rd century BC Egyptian priest and historian Manetho, Sobekneferu was not only Amenemhat IV's sister, but his wife as well. Incestuous marriages were common among ancient Egyptian royals in order to keep power and wealth within the family and away from ambitious rival families. The devastating consequences of incestuous unions left offspring with shorter than average lifespans. This meant that the kingdom frequently underwent periods of instability as power was transferred from one ruler to the next. Much of what we know about Sobekneferu comes from the limited monuments and artifacts that have been discovered, which include statues, scarabs, seals, beads, and other records. This glazed cylinder seal and stetite scarab inscribed with Sobekneferu's name provide evidence of her rule. Sobekneferu is also mentioned in both the Karnak king list and the Saqqara tablet. However, her name was notably absent from the Abydos king list, along with every other female pharaoh, including Hatshepsut, who is widely regarded as the most powerful and successful female pharaoh in all of ancient Egyptian history. The name Sobekneferu translates to the beauty of Sobek. This was the first instance of a pharaoh choosing a regnal name associated with the ancient Egyptian crocodile god, Sobek. The deity was viewed as the creator of the Nile River and associated with pharaonic power and military prowess. Sobek was also known as the Lord of the Waters and believed to have the power to provide inundation and fertility to the land. The crocodile god grew to great prominence during the Middle Kingdom period and was the central deity of several cults at the time. Sobekneferu adopted the complete royal titulary traditionally reserved for pharaohs, which consisted of 5 names, symbolizing both worldly power and spiritual might. This is significant because while other women before Sobekneferu are believed to have held positions of power, such as Queen Regent, none were previously granted the full royal titles that effectively made Sobekneferu a fully fledged pharaoh in her own right. Sobekneferu used male titles such as Son of Ra and wore male garments, but still chose to retain her femininity in artistic representations. An example of this can be observed on this damaged statue of Sobekneferu, which shows her wearing a male kilt on top of a female dress. Although her head is missing from this particular statue, Sobekneferu was known to wear the male headdress as well. There is no evidence to suggest that she attempted to conceal her gender, but likely donned the male pharaoh attire out of respect for tradition. This choice also undoubtedly helped to placate the many critics she likely had at the time. Egyptologists have argued that Sobekneferu faced intense scrutiny and opposition from Egyptians, who believed that the allowance of a female pharaoh upset the patriarchal system that had long featured a dominant male leader. They likely regarded a female ruler as an offense to Mahat, the ancient Egyptian goddess of balance, order, and morality. Egyptologists have theorized that women were elevated to the throne to maintain social order during times of crises, but that it was only ever intended to be a temporary measure while a male leader was carefully selected. Egyptian society was generally oppressive toward women, and the reigns of female rulers were often erased from records by their male successors. By most accounts, though, Sobekneferu succeeded in her endeavors and was considered to be a strong, effective ruler. In her time as pharaoh, Sobekneferu was tasked with strengthening foreign relations while simultaneously protecting Egypt from its enemies and natural disasters. Sobekneferu made significant contributions to her father's mortuary pyramid at Hawara, located near the Fayum oasis. During the early 18th century BC, ancient Mesopotamia's city-states once again became fragmented after the Akkadian Empire disintegrated at the hands of the nomadic Gutian people from the Zagros Mountains. The small kingdom of Babylon rose to great prominence under the leadership of a cunning Amorite king named Hammurabi. A fearsome ruler and military commander, Hammurabi conquered all of Mesopotamia, with Babylon serving as the heart of his powerful new empire. From the time of its formation, 6 centuries earlier, Babylon had no official ruler until Hammurabi's father, Sin-Muballit, declared himself king in 1812 BC. During his reign, Sin-Muballit succeeded in a modest expansion of Babylon's territory by conquering the city-states of Kish, Sippar, and Borsippa, which laid the groundwork for his son and heir Hammurabi to effectively birth an empire. When his father became ill and abdicated in 1792 BC, Hammurabi ascended to the throne at the age of 18. During the first years of his reign, Hammurabi focused on vastly improving Babylon's infrastructure by overseeing the completion of his father's public projects and initiating many of his own. He heightened the city's walls for greater protection from enemies and added many new temples dedicated to Marduk, the Babylonian god of thunderstorms. Hammurabi issued a proclamation forgiving all debt owed to the kingdom, making him extremely popular among his subjects. The first decade of his reign was relatively peaceful until the powerful kingdom of Elam invaded the Mesopotamian plain. Elam first conquered the city-state of Eshnunna and then set its sights on Babylon. In an attempt to consolidate power, Elam tried to spark a war between the kingdom of Larsa and Babylon. Having uncovered Elam's plot, Hammurabi and the king of Larsa, Rim-Sin, formed an alliance to hold the foreign invaders at bay. Together, they were able to repel the Elamite forces, but the limited number of soldiers that Rim-Sin committed to the effort enraged Hammurabi. In retaliation, Hammurabi persuaded several neighboring city-states and kingdoms to march on Larsa. Their combined forces laid siege to the city for 6 months, ultimately leading to its downfall. Rim-Sin managed to escape, but was captured and executed shortly thereafter. Hammurabi, realizing that he was becoming much more powerful than his southern allies, decided to betray them and seize their lands to further expand his own empire. After laying waste to his former allies, Hammurabi had complete control of southern Mesopotamia. He was able to accomplish this great feat in coordination with Mari's assistance. Although Babylon had already expanded far beyond his father's wildest dreams, Hammurabi's lust for power only intensified with time. Mari's decision to send troops to aid Hammurabi in his conquest of southern Mesopotamia caused major unrest within the kingdom. Hammurabi took advantage of this situation by betraying Mari and marching north towards the weakened kingdom. He succeeded in annihilating Mari's capital and proceeded to execute its king. As a gesture of mercy, he allowed Mari and its northern cities to persist as small villages under his rule. Hammurabi's next plan was to invade the independent kingdom of Assyria, located to the north. The legendary king, Shamshi-Adad, had recently died of old age, causing discontent throughout the kingdom and enabling Hammurabi to swiftly conquer Assyria's cities. This final conquest solidified his control over the entirety of Mesopotamia. But his rule over the far-reaching empire was short-lived, as a severe illness led to his death at the age of 60 in 1750 BC. Hammurabi's trademark military tactic was to build temporary dams in an enemy city's rivers in order to starve its population or drown them by releasing the water to create an unrelenting flood. This merciless maneuver proved to be a key factor behind the rapid expansion of his empire. Hammurabi's most celebrated accomplishment was the implementation of a code of 282 laws, referred to as the Code of Hammurabi. The laws were a compilation of revised Sumerian and Akkadian law codes. The Code of Hammurabi was inscribed in the Akkadian language using cuneiform script carved into a 7-foot stele made of black diorite. The top of the stele shows Hammurabi standing and receiving the laws from Shamash, the Babylonian god of justice. The code attempted to achieve equality through such laws as, if a man destroys the eye of another man, they shall destroy his eye. And if a man breaks another man's bone, his bone shall be broken. But fell far short of modern standards of equality due to its categorization of people into 3 distinct classes: property owners, free men, and slaves. Some examples of this injustice include, if anyone steals cattle or sheep or a donkey or a pig or a goat, if it belonged to a god or to the court, the thief shall pay 30-fold. If they belonged to a freedman of the king, he shall pay 10-fold. If the thief has nothing with which to pay, he shall be put to death. And if a male slave says to his master, "You are not my master," his master shall prove him to be his slave and shall cut off his ear. Some laws were particularly harsh towards women and required only accusations to be enforced, such as, if a man's wife has the finger pointed at her on account of another, but has not been caught lying with him, for her husband's sake she shall plunge into the sacred river. The Code of Hammurabi went on to influence several subsequent codes of law, most notably those found in the Book of the Covenant from the Hebrew Bible. The Babylonian Empire was short-lived because of Hammurabi's inability or perhaps disinterest in establishing a strong bureaucratic system. His successors were unable to sustain the massive empire, and it progressively crumbled over the next century until its complete collapse during the 16th century BC. Through ruthless determination, Hammurabi built a vast empire and successfully implemented one of the world's first systems of laws.
During the 7th century BC, the ancient Greek city-state of Athens was experiencing a time of great social and political unrest. Determined to save Athens from ruin, the city's council of aristocrats appointed an oppressive lawmaker named Draco to rewrite their entire legal system. Draco's constitution led to the brutal execution of countless Athenian citizens. His laws and punishments were so harsh that his name has become synonymous with mercilessness and cruelty. Draco belonged to a prominent Athenian family and was rumored to have been related to King Codrus, the final king of Athens 4 centuries earlier. Athens was growing dramatically in size and had developed into a major political and commercial hub on the Aegean Sea. By this period, Athens had moved away from being ruled by kings. Instead, it was largely controlled by a council of aristocrats called the Areopagus. The council met on a large outcrop overlooking the city of Athens, called the Hill of Ares. The hill was named after the Greek god of war and was the alleged location where Ares was put on trial by other gods for the murder of Poseidon's son. The unwritten laws at the time were poorly conveyed to the majority of citizens and were regularly altered to suit the interests of the upper class. Judges routinely showed favoritism toward the wealthy, and this exploitative system created great unrest within Athenian society. The issue became so great that the governing aristocratic families of Athens finally decided to abandon their secretive legal system and promulgate the laws in writing to the public, enabling every Athenian citizen to understand the legal process. The Areopagus authorized an aristocratic legislator named Draco to create the new written code of laws. It is unclear why Draco was chosen for this task, though he may have been a member of the Areopagus himself. After 3 years of planning and deliberating, Draco introduced the first written constitution in Athenian history, known as the Draconian Constitution, in 621 BC. Plutarch wrote of Draco's laws that one penalty was assigned to almost all transgressions, namely death, so that even those convicted of idleness were put to death, and those who stole salad or fruit received the same punishment as those who committed sacrilege or murder. Unfortunately, any written text of the Constitution has not survived, and historians are uncertain if death was truly the punishment for most crimes, or if Draco's character was maligned for unknown reasons. Draco also introduced a new Athenian governing body called the Council of 400, consisting of elected officials who would govern Athens alongside the Areopagus. The elected officials generally consisted of oligarchs tasked with maintaining peace within Athens. While Draco has been vilified for his excessive brutality, his political reforms were an important step in the development of Athenian democracy. However, the political and social unrest in Athens, which had led to the initial solicitation of Draco by the Areopagus, only continued and intensified in the following years. In response to these reforms, the lawmaker himself appears to have been run out of Athens, spending the remainder of his years in exile on the neighboring island of Aegina. As a result, in the 590s BC, a new Athenian lawmaker by the name of Solon was asked to replace Draco's controversial constitution. Solon's reforms repealed many of Draco's harsher measures, especially those related to his overenthusiastic use of the death penalty. However, Solon expanded upon Draco's voting reform to include every man in Athens. In the centuries that followed, Draco became an object of severe criticism, while Solon was revered as the founder of the city's greatness. For instance, by the 4th century BC, Draco's notoriety had already been cemented when a well-known Athenian orator and demagogue of the time, Demades, exclaimed in front of a crowd that Draco's laws were written not with ink, but blood. According to Plutarch, when asked why he assigned the death penalty to most offenses, Draco replied that, in his opinion, the lesser ones deserved it, and for the greater ones, no heavier penalty could be found. Despite the protests from the poor and indebted, much of the Athenian upper class supported Draco's relentless laws. Sometime around 600 BC, during a visit to a theater in Aegina, a group of wealthy aristocratic supporters barraged Draco with cloaks in a show of support, and he suffocated to death under the weight of the clothing. Through great severity and cruelty, Draco crafted the first known written constitution in history and laid the groundwork for Athenian democracy.